Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. This is a special video daily editorial as we are getting a broad exploration update here from Skeena Resources, traded on the TSX under the symbol SKE and on the OTCQX under the symbol SKREF. I am joined by the company's Vice President of Exploration and Resource Development, Paul Geddes. And as much as this is going to be a broad exploration update, we are going to focus a lot on the recent news that came out December 8th regarding some high-grade drill results from the Albino Waste Facility. Now, the headline number here was 10.13 grams per ton gold equivalent over almost 17 meters. Total program was 12 holes, shallow holes, only totaling 212 meters. But that's because this is, again, a waste facility from the past producing high-grade mine. Paul, I know you've put together some slides for us here. So give us a bit more insights, please, on this Albino Waste Facility and what it could mean for the company moving forward, please.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. Thanks again, Corey, for having me. Just our forward-looking statements. I've got a little deck here to talk about what we've discovered and basically put together at the Albino Waste Facility. But what I also want to do is remind your audience of why we're talking about this waste facility and why we're actually in there drilling. You know, if we go back and look at the production period for Eskay Creek in between 1994 and 2008, you know, they produced some ridiculous grades coming out of that mine with 45 gram per ton, basically life of mine average gold grade, you know, 2,000 grams per ton silver grade. But the cutoffs for that mine were incredibly high. It was greater than 30 grams per ton gold equivalent for any material that they direct shipped. Now, direct shipping, what it means that basically they went in, they mined the rock, they put it onto trucks, and they sent it away to the various smelters. It wasn't until a few years later that they actually had the mill commissioned, and they were able to reduce that cutoff grade to 15 grams per ton because they were forming and shipping a concentrate. Keep in mind, during that period, they were also direct shipping ore as well. But I guess the real thesis behind all of this is the mine economics and the function against gold price. So what we've got here in the yellow bar is gold price in US dollars per ounce. You can see it was roughly floating around $500-600 US an ounce, maybe even lower, in between the periods 1994 through 2008. And we've got the Eskay Creek production period in there as well. So when you've got those lower commodity prices, that forces really high cutoff grades. And again, that's why they cherry picked. They preferentially took that contact mudstone, which was high in the impurities, paid the penalties, and pushed that off to the various smelters. They also had a very high OPEX at the time, right, which factors into the cutoff grades because they were remote. There was no cheap electricity to power everything, and it was all diesel operations. So any material that was below the cutoff grade was basically uneconomic. They threw it away. Now, the other thing too is the historical mill recoveries. They only averaged 80%. So 20% of anything that went through on that 45 gram per ton material was basically going to the tails and getting deposited into some sort of facility, which we'll talk about here in a second.
Paul, if I could just ask one quick question regarding that chart there. I think everyone's going to look at that production period and see that gold was rising quite drastically when they closed the mine down. Any more insights on why they closed it down when gold was running so much?
Well, that's a great point. Keep in mind, nobody has a crystal ball. So in 2006, it's not labeled here, but essentially that's when they made the decision to shut the mine down. And after that point, there was no actual production taking place from underground, no feed coming out, and they were just simply mopping up and mining stockpiles and sending those off. So it's too bad. You know, you can just imagine if this entire timeline had been shifted by 10 years further out, how much more money this thing would have made.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks. Okay, so this is just a generalized cross-section through the deposit. We don't really have to worry about some of these other intersections, but what I really want to point out is this dark gray material that's sitting down here. And this is the contact mudstone. This is what Barrick was historically mining. This is the super high grade material. And then you can see hosted in the rhyolites in this light gray material, the grades tend to be a little lower. Now, in this sort of halo gray material, you can see the former mine development. You can see where they stoked out the contact mudstone, but they also had to drive their development, their ramps, their drifts, etc., through this lower grade material. And this low grade is nothing to sneeze at. Like, here's an example of a drill hole close to 6 grams per ton over 26 meters. So when they tunneled this out, they had to deposit it somewhere because it never went through the mill. Well, this is where we enter the Albino Waste Facility. So here's a large scale map of the property. Here is our conceptual open pit for the 22 zones, the 21 zones in the north, the former historic Eskay Creek mine site, and the main access road that takes us out. Our currently permitted tailing storage facility is over here, and that's the Tom McKay TSF. But most importantly is the Albino Waste Facility. So prior to Barrick having permitted the Tom McKay, they were depositing again all of their tailings as well as mine development waste rock into the Albino Waste Facility. So they would literally just truck it over, bring it over to the shore, dump it off, and then a bulldozer would grade it in. I don't think we've actually ever shown in our public disclosures what the TF or the Albino looks like. But again, here we are looking north. That access road comes in along the east side. There's one and only one outlet point, which is monitored. And you can see here in the darker blue material, this is obviously the deeper water. And then over here, where it's shallower, it's only less than a meter deep. This is basically where everything was deposited. Well, there was a lot of rumoring that went on. You know, we had heard stories when we first captured the property of, you know, wow, there's 10 gram material that got deposited in there. There's 5 gram material. However, you can't run a resource estimate just on conjecture and rumors. So we had to go in and drill. These 8 white drill holes right here are what we did in March of last year. And you can see they're very, very impressive grades and widths. These are uncut values. As an example, 13 grams per ton over 14 meters in hole 846, which is located here. Obviously, as we get closer to the shore, say hole 842, things get a little thinner, but again, the grades are still consistent. So this was a tremendous start. Unfortunately, we were drilling off the ice. The conditions deteriorated. We had to basically stop the program a little bit earlier ahead of schedule. And then what we did this year was to bring in a barge so that we could actually have the drill floating around on the ice, or sorry, on the water surface without disturbing the shale cap that sits above all of that material. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I was really wrong. I thought we were only going to have these really super high grade hits, but essentially everything that we've drilled in the phase 2 program has also intersected substantial grades, apart from hole 21-900, which only hit a small amount of material over 4 meters. But that kind of makes sense because it is literally sitting right on shore. So when the grading was occurring, you know, obviously we wouldn't have as thick a component in there. Now, to date, we've also drilled 20 drill holes. The average thickness based on all of those drill holes is about 13.2 meters. And the average length weighted grade is 6.21 grams per ton gold equivalent. So it's, you know, based on what we have right now, just ever so slightly high than our current mineral resource estimate. The other thing too that's nice is the impurities. So the mercury, the antimony, the arsenic, the concentrations of those impurities within the Albino waste facility are analogous to our in situ mineral resource estimate for the main Eskay Creek deposits. So there's no terrible surprises that are coming out of this. It's exactly the same material that we expected to see, and it's comparable to, again, you know, what's sitting at Eskay Creek currently.
So overall, Paul, does this just mean it should be a smooth process to process this type of ore because it is essentially just sitting there in this tailings facility?
Yeah, well, maybe just to roll back a bit, what we're planning on doing is we want to finish off this program, right? Because as you can see, I'll just flip back to the map, there's still a lot of areas that we haven't even investigated yet. So the idea is that we're going to basically populate the entire lake on 50-meter drill hole spacings. And then subsequent to that, we're going to come back in and fill all that in on 25-meter centers. So how does that lead in? That'll be 54 drill holes, and we're going to do that with 2 rigs. Their centers is the first pass, and the 25-meter centers infill is the second pass. Why? Well, ultimately, we'd like to put this on the books as a resource, hopefully get it into the indicated, potentially measured categories, perform metallurgy, de-risk it, and then have it enter into the mine plan at some point. Now, Bill, basically answering the question that you had asked is, we're not going to get this into the feasibility study in time. It's just scheduling conflicts. It just won't work. But if everything works out the way it should, it'd be a very, very simple process to extract this mineralization, because we would just simply get it permitted to drain the remaining water in the lake and then just dredge it out. And if we go back to the cross section, you can see just how homogeneous the mineralization is. So in the light gray, we have the bedrock surface. And keep in mind, this is a very wide composite width here. But anything basically from below the water surface down, 13 meters or so with our average drill hole width is easily going to be taken out. And it's not as though you have, a singular high grade hit in the pile that's being smeared out over the remainder of dead mineralization. We start in this example, 2.78 grams per ton rock, we end in 10. The contacts at the bottom are extremely sharp. So we basically go from gram material to nothing almost instantly. So it's very predictable mineralization at this point in the game.
Paul, how big could this resource be? Because let's face it, right? We even showed the big picture of it. This isn't going to be a massive resource here, but in your eyes, what is possible to actually have available to you ore-wise here?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, right? But I can tell you right now what I see. Based on all the drilling that we've done to date, we're looking at about 350 meters of strike length, and it's averaging about 150 meters wide. Again, the average mineralization thickness is 13 meters with an average grade of 6.21. So for us to come up with an amount, say perhaps north of 250,000 ounces, I think is quite achievable. Perhaps there's a little bit more than that, but we'll just have to drill it off and see what we got.
Time frame then, how long do you think will take to drill this off in the 50-meter centers and the 25-meter centers to get to a resource?
Yeah, great question. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw 2 drill rigs at this in the first quarter. So right now we want this to be as safe as possible, obviously, because we're drilling on a meter of water. So we've engaged engineers to actually help us and assist in building ice that support the rigs. We'll get all the pads laid out. And then probably in the first 2 weeks of January, we'll mobilize 2 drill rigs onto it and have it done within about 45 days.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Yeah. That I think clears up a lot of questions on this. What's at least the potential here?
Exactly. We'll have to add some lead time then for analyses to get those numbers back. And then, once we have all the values and the assays, then we can hand it off to our resource department and they can come up with a number for us.
Paul, have you ever drilled off yourself personally in your background, a waste facility, anything like this?
I did actually at Barkerville Gold Mines at the Bonanza Ledge deposit, which was one of the deposits up in Wells. And again, we were in a situation whereby there were rumors about the potential grade of the waste facility. So I'm no stranger to this, but I'll be honest with you, I have not expected to see grades like this. But in the same light, it kind of makes sense, because if we go back to our original thesis and argument about the history, the cutoff grades were so high. For us to be sitting on 6 gram material kind of makes sense.
Just goes to show how high grade this mine was when it was in production, really not that long ago either.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so that pretty much sums up what we're doing at Albino Lake. The other thing that I wanted to talk about too is our regional exploration program. I think bullet point number 1 should have been, we're still waiting on assays. So that's why we haven't put anything out yet. But you can see here in the hatched material that's gold with the white halo, basically all our historical soil anomalies. Now, keep in mind, we've got coverage through everything else now at this point, courtesy of our summer programs. But we tend to keep this information proprietary and hold it very close to our hearts and not let it out into the public domain. So forgive me if I'm not showing you all the details here. All the drill holes that we have planned are in the black dots. And basically our favorite areas are more proximal to the mine itself. Having said that, we've also judiciously ranked all the targets, and we're also focusing on other areas throughout the deposit area as well. Now, this phase of drilling that we've been performing is very much only focusing the top 200 meters. Largely, this has never been explored, as well as from Skeena's standpoint, we've been so focused on de-risking the open pits and bringing those into reserves that we really haven't spent enough time doing the regional exploration. And that's why we're assessing everything at this point in the game. What's nice though too is our current open pit mine plan has the potential for a year 6 expansion. This is based on the PFS. Now, because the mill is already going to be paid for, we don't necessarily need to come up with 4, 5, 6 gram material. We could simply drop that down to maybe even 1 gram per ton gold equivalent. And we'd like to see maybe at least another 1 million ounces to add to the existing mine plan. Now, although we've got a lot of underground targets, there's a huge amount of potential here for that as well. Again, we're not considering that in this phase of exploration. The reason being is that shallow ounces are cheap ounces. We can put them together that much more quickly. And keep in mind, the PFS and the FS are contemplating a truck and shovel open pit mining fleet. So it's kind of pointless to add capital intensive resources from an underground perspective if you really haven't sanitized the top few hundred meters for the remainder of the property. The other thing too is the program was about 35,000 meters. And unfortunately, due to some of the weather conditions that we had with these atmospheric rivers, you know, the avalanche hazards got extremely bad out there. So what we elected to do is, for safety reasons, just shut it down a little bit early. And we're going to be coming back and drilling off the remainder of that program in early 2022 in parallel with the albino programs.
So Paul, you mentioned that you guys had ranked these surface targets that were being drilled here. How many targets did you have? Any that you're even more excited about? What more information can you give us on these?
I don't have the target areas labeled per se on this map exactly. We have another one that we use internally. But again, we like to favor proximity to site infrastructure. So as an example, the plant and the mill and everything else is going to be going over here basically where it says 21 zones. So for us to put in a couple of 100,000 ounces in an open pit down in the Tom McKay and truck it 6 kilometers back is not as advantageous if we can have some low-hanging fruit that's already within the mine footprint. So that's one of the target ranking criteria that we're utilizing. My personal favorites are, again, the strike extensions of the 22 zone, where it basically is wide open at depth, it's wide open at strike, maybe where it intersects the lower and the even lower mudstone. Again, a lot of these untested soil anomalies that we're calling the 21 E-zone strike extensions, those are quite exciting as well.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. If anybody has any follow-up questions regarding the Albino Waste Facility or any of this other kind of regional exploration, you can always email me, fleck@kereport.com. Paul, take us through some of these appendices then.
Oh, sorry, that's pretty much it there, Corey.
Okay. Yep. One other thing to note too is that just today, December 13th, when we are recording this, Skeena announced a strategic investment from Franco, Nevada, totaling almost $31 million Canadian. Franco is paying, these are flow-through shares, $21 Canadian per share. So we even saw the stock price benefit on the back of this news. I will be reaching out to the president and CEO, Walter Coles, to discuss this more on a corporate front, but this was, again, just very focused on the exploration. Still, results that are coming, and also some more information on that albino waste facility. Paul, thank you for your time. Thank you for putting together these slides. I know everybody does enjoy these insights, so we'll be following up as you guys get some of those assay results that, unfortunately, you're not alone. Everybody is waiting on assay results.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Corey.